Okay, so are you ready for this? We are diving deep today into dealing with anxiety through prayer.
Sounds good.
And the source you gave me, Pray With Me, Overcoming Anxiety. It's really awesome.
Yeah, it's great.
I mean, it's got such a practical approach, right?
It really does.
Yeah.
Step by step.
Which is what we need. Because anxiety is something that, so many of us deal with. And this guide doesn't try to pretend it's not real or anything.
Right.
It actually compares anxiety to waves crashing over you.
Yeah, that's a really powerful image.
Right. It really captures it, I think.
It really does. It sets the tone for the whole approach.
Right.
It's not about, like you said, pretending anxiety doesn't exist.
Yeah.
It's about confronting it.
Right.
But through faith, there's a great quote from Philippians that says this perfectly. Do not be anxious about anything, but in every situation, by prayer and petition, with thanksgiving, present your requests to God. And notice, it doesn't say don't feel anxious.
Right.
It acknowledges the feeling is there.
But there's a way to handle it. I love that. Okay, so tell me, what's the first step this guide recommends?
Okay, so step one is about recognizing your anxiety and naming it. Being honest with yourself and with God about what's causing you to feel anxious. The text even suggests writing it down.
Oh, that's interesting. Like you're taking away its power by making it concrete.
Exactly.
Yeah, sometimes, when something is just kind of floating around in your head, it's so much bigger and scarier than when you actually say it or write it down.
It is, totally.
Yeah.
And that actually leads perfectly into step two,
Right.
which is all about shifting your focus. The guide uses this analogy of Peter walking on water.
Oh, yeah.
When Peter kept his eyes on Jesus, he was fine. But the moment he looked at the waves, he started to sink.
Oh, man, I remember that story. I always think about it when I'm feeling overwhelmed. It's such a good reminder that where we choose to focus our attention makes such a big difference. It's like in that psalm that says, I lift up my eyes to the mountains, where does my help come from? It's all about looking in the right direction.
Exactly. And, sometimes the right direction isn't some far-off mountaintop. It's about shifting our focus inward to our faith and that source of strength within us. And that actually brings us to step three, which may sound a little counterintuitive at first. It's replacing worry with worship.
So even if you don't feel like singing praises, the act of doing so is a way of pushing back against the anxiety?
I got it. That's the idea. It's based on a really powerful concept from the book of Hebrews, offering a sacrifice of praise.
Okay.
Now, you don't have to think about an actual animal sacrifice or anything. This is about choosing to focus on gratitude and praise, even when you're feeling anxious. It may feel a little strange at first.
Yeah.
But think about it like this. Have you ever noticed how, even when you don't feel happy, if you put on a smile, it can actually kind of shift your mood?
Oh, that's so true. I've definitely noticed that. It's like tricking your brain into feeling better.
Exactly. It's like
Right.
that with praise, too. By choosing to focus on the good, even when it's hard, you're actively shifting your mental state away from anxiety. It's a way of reclaiming your power and choosing peace, even in the middle of chaos.
Wow. That's a powerful way to look at it. It's almost like a form of mental jujitsu,
Yeah.
using the energy of the anxiety to create something positive.
I like that, mental jujitsu. We have to remember that one.
Yeah.
And this idea of choosing praise actually leads really well into step four, which is grounding ourselves in God's promises.
Okay, so what does that look like in practice?
Well, the guide uses Isaiah 41:10. So do not fear, for I am with you. Do not be dismayed, for I am your God. It's a reminder that even when anxiety feels like it's going to consume us, we're not alone.
Right.
There is a higher power that is always with us, offering us comfort and strength.
That's one of my favorite verses. There's something so comforting about knowing that you're not facing these things alone. It's like having this invisible safety net,
It really is. And that feeling of being held and supported leads perfectly into the final step, which is probably the most challenging, but also the most liberating.
Ooh, I'm intrigued. Tell me more. What is this final anxiety-busting step?
Surrender control.
Ooh.
Letting go of the need to micromanage every single aspect of our lives and trusting that there's a higher plan.
Yeah, that's easier said than done, right?
It is.
But I understand what you mean. It's like recognizing that we weren't meant to carry all that weight on our own. We weren't meant to have all the answers or control all the outcomes.
You got it. And I think that's where faith really comes in. It's about trusting that even when things feel chaotic and uncertain, there's a bigger picture unfolding. A plan that we may not fully understand right now, but one that is ultimately for our good. It's about trusting in that even when it feels scary to let go. It's funny, isn't it? The more we try to control every little thing, the more anxious we get. But when we surrender, when we let go, that's when we actually find peace.
It's so true. It's like trying to hold on to sand, you know? The tighter you grip it, the more slips through your fingers. But if you just open your hand, it can rest there peacefully.
That's a great way to put it. And surrender isn't about giving up or being passive.
Yeah.
It's about realizing we're part of something so much bigger than ourselves.
Yeah.
Something that's always there to guide us and support us. And when we tap into that, we tap into a strength that's way bigger than anything we could come up with on our own.
You know what's interesting is that this idea of surrender, it's not just a religious thing. You don't even have to be a person of faith to get it. Think about it. We surrender to the flow of a river when we go rafting. We surrender to the rhythm of the ocean when we swim. We surrender to the laws of physics when we ride a bike. You know, there's this wisdom in realizing that sometimes the best thing we can do is just let go and trust the process.
That's such a good point. You're absolutely right. Surrender is everywhere in life. And when we resist it, when we try to force things to go our way, that's when we create all this friction and conflict. But when we align ourselves with the flow, when we surrender to what is, that's when we find ease and grace.
I love that. It's like we're trading in a white-knuckled grip for a more open and receptive way of being. And I think that's what makes this approach to overcoming anxiety through prayer so powerful. It's not about just managing the symptoms. It's about really transforming how we relate to anxiety itself.
Totally. It's about recognizing that anxiety, while it's definitely uncomfortable, it's often trying to tell us something,
Yeah.
It's a sign that maybe something needs to shift. Maybe we're holding on too tight to something. Or that we need to realign ourselves with our values and what's really important to us. And when we approach anxiety that way, it's not an enemy anymore. It's more like a teacher.
Okay, so we've talked about the 5 big steps: acknowledge, shift focus, choose praise, ground ourselves in promises, and surrender. But you might be thinking, okay, that sounds great, but how do I actually do this in real life? Well, good news, this guide has you covered. It actually offers some really practical advice. I'm curious to know what you think of it.
Yeah, it's amazing. I was really impressed with the practical side of the guide. It doesn't just talk about concepts. It gives you real tools and techniques you can use every day.
Yeah.
Like, for example, it talks about how important it is to have a dedicated space for prayer and reflection.
That makes sense. I've found that having a physical space, even if it's just a corner in my bedroom that's just for quiet time and thinking, it really does make a difference. It's like telling your mind and body that this is a time for peace, for connecting to something bigger than yourself.
It's like creating a sanctuary, a sacred space where you can get away from all the noise and chaos of the world and just reconnect with yourself and your faith.
Exactly. And it doesn't have to be anything fancy, right?
Mhm.
It's more about the intention behind it.
Yeah.
I've even used a park bench or a spot under a tree as my prayer space when I'm out and about. It's about finding what works for you, what helps you create that sense of stillness and connection.
And sometimes creating that space is as simple as just closing your eyes and taking a couple of deep breaths wherever you happen to be.
Yeah.
It's about making a conscious choice to go inward, to create that peace inside yourself.
That's a great reminder. It's not always about what's going on around us. It's about finding that sanctuary within. And, speaking of practical tips, the guide talks a lot about the power of journaling, which I know is something you're a big fan of.
Absolutely. Journaling is one of my favorite tools for working through my emotions, figuring out my thought patterns, and deepening my connection to my faith. And this guide really encourages using journaling to actively work with anxiety instead of just letting it take over your mind.
Okay, so how does that work? How do you actually journal about your anxiety in a way that's helpful?
Well, one technique the guide suggests is to just start by writing down everything that's making you anxious, no matter how big or small. Just get it out of your head and onto the page. And then you can start to explore those anxieties a little deeper. You can ask yourself, what's at the root of this anxiety? What story am I telling myself about this situation? What are the worst things I'm imagining could happen?
That's really interesting. It's like you're bringing those fears out into the open so you can really look at them.
Exactly. And sometimes just the act of putting those anxieties into words can make them less powerful. It's like they lose their grip on you when they're not hiding in the shadows of your mind anymore.
Right.
And then after you've spent some time with your anxieties, the guide suggests shifting your focus to gratitude. Like, what are you grateful for right now? What are the good things in your life, even the small ones?
So you're bringing that element of praise into your journaling practice as well.
Yes, exactly. And I know sometimes when anxiety is really intense, it can be hard to find things to be grateful for. But that's where journaling can really help. It helps you to become more aware of the good things in your life, even when things are tough. It helps you shift your perspective and remember that even in the darkest times, there's always some light,
It's like training your mind to look for the positive, to look for the silver linings. And that can be such a powerful way to counteract anxiety.
It really is. And the guide also talks about using your journal to write down your prayers and reflections. You can write about your fears, your hopes, your dreams, things you're wondering about God. It's like having this direct connection with the divine, a way to process what you're going through and ask for guidance and support.
That's beautiful. It's like having this sacred conversation with your faith.
And another amazing thing about journaling is that it lets you see your progress over time. You can look back and see how your relationship with anxiety has changed, how your faith has grown, how your perspective has shifted. It's a concrete reminder of your resilience, your strength, and your journey toward peace.
It's like you're creating a map of your inner world, charting the ups and downs and ultimately the path towards healing.
I love that.
And journaling is just one tool. This guide also talks a lot about the importance of community and support when you're dealing with anxiety.
Oh, absolutely. We're social creatures. You know, we need connection. And when we're struggling, having people who care about us and understand what we're going through can make all the difference in the world.
Exactly. It's like that saying, shared joy is doubled, shared sorrow is halved. When we share our burdens with other people, they feel lighter. And when we get encouragement from people who get it, it gives us strength to keep going.
Yeah, it reminds us that we're not alone. And I think that's one of the most powerful messages of this whole approach. We're all part of something so much bigger than ourselves.
Yeah.
Something that's always there to support us both from within and through our connection with others.
Absolutely.
You know, another thing that really stood out to me in this guide is that it doesn't just focus on the spiritual stuff.
Right.
It also talks a lot about self-care. Yeah, absolutely. Taking care of our physical and mental health is just as important as taking care of our spiritual well-being. They all work together.
Yeah, exactly. Like if you're not sleeping well or eating healthy food, it's going to be so much harder to handle anxiety, no matter how much you pray or meditate.
It is.
Right.
It really is. It's about understanding that we're whole beings, mind, body, and spirit. And all those parts need attention and care.
It's not just about adding prayer on top of everything else. It's about creating a lifestyle that supports you.
Exactly. The guide encourages things like getting enough sleep, eating a balanced diet, exercising regularly, and doing things you enjoy that help you relax.
All those things we know we should be doing. But it's so easy to let them slide when you're feeling stressed.
It is. But when we make self-care a priority, it really helps us in our fight against anxiety. It's like building up our strength and giving our minds and bodies what they need to deal with challenges.
I love that. It's like giving yourself a hug from the inside out.
Yeah. And self-care doesn't have to be complicated or expensive. It can be as simple as taking a few minutes to stretch, listen to your favorite music, or just be out in nature. It's about those little things that make you feel good and nourish your soul.
And it's important to remember that self-care isn't selfish. It's an act of self-love. And when we take care of ourselves, we can show up better for the people we care about.
Yeah, I love that. When we take care of ourselves, we're stronger and more able to handle whatever life throws at us, including anxiety.
Okay, so we've explored this incredible guide, Pray With Me, Overcoming Anxiety, and I feel like we've really uncovered some amazing insights.
We have. It's a really valuable resource that combines these practical steps with these spiritual principles to create a really well-rounded approach to anxiety.
Yeah, we talked about the 5 key steps: acknowledging anxiety, shifting our focus, choosing praise, grounding ourselves in promises, and surrendering control. And we also talked about how to put these ideas into practice by creating a prayer space, journaling, connecting with our community, and practicing self-care.
Yeah, and what's so cool about this approach is that it's not about trying to ignore or suppress anxiety.
Right, yeah.
It's about actually engaging with it, understanding it, and ultimately transforming it through faith and self-care.
It's about finding that inner peace and strength, that knowing that no matter what challenges come up, we have the tools to get through them.
It is.
Yeah.
And I think that's something everyone can relate to, whether they're religious or not. You know, it's that universal human desire to find peace within ourselves.
Absolutely. So as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with this. What really stuck with you today? Was it one of the steps? A practical tip? Or maybe just the overall message of hope and empowerment? Whatever it was, hold on to that and let it be your guide on your own journey to overcoming anxiety. You have the power within you to create a life filled with peace, joy, and strength.
You do.
That's it for our deep dive this week. We'll see you next time.